our second session of the day, Sound Editing for Film and Television with Vijay Rathinam, the founder of The Audioville, who will take us through the complete sound editing pipeline from spotting sessions to final delivery. Vijay Rathinam is an acclaimed supervising sound editor and sound designer with over 2 decades of experience and more than 160 feature films to his credit, including collaborations with globally renowned directors. His recent work includes the major Bollywood box office successes Durandar and Durandar the Revenge. He has also served as a jury member for the Indian Recording Arts Academy. Over to you, Vijay sir.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Palm, for giving me this opportunity to share what I know a little bit. So, today I'm going to talk a little bit about how I do things personally, and then these kind of things can differ from one person to another. Um, if you find my way of work in some way useful, I think you can take that from here. So I'm Vijay Rathinam. I'm a sound effects editor, sound designer, supervising sound editor. I've worked on various different countries, markets, British films, American films, Chinese films, Russian films, all kinds of things. And the reason why I chose to do this topic is that because I work with so many different markets and so many different things, I had to evolve my workflow constantly, change my workflow constantly to fit a different region and their style of working. And through that process, I've come into I figured out my own way of doing things, which makes me more efficient. So that's what we're going to explore. And the first thing that I want to mention here is, sound editors are sonic artists. We're all definitely sonic artists. And every painter, he needs a brush. Every writer needs a pen, a canvas for a painter. Similarly, we are also artists, but we need tools like DAWs, computers, we need plugins, so these are essentially the tools that we use to get the results that we want. But again, that doesn't, just because we are using these new age tools doesn't make us any less of an artist. We are still the artist. But this session that I'm trying to do today is not just about the tools, but it's also about the art. Okay, so what this session that I'm trying to do is I'm trying to share my methods of finding what is the sonic identity of a film. When I start a film, what kind of sounds should I do for that film? What kind of sounds should I not do for that film? So I'm trying to answer those kind of questions from my point of view, how I come to those kind of conclusions, and my workflow from spotting to delivery, and then my sound design principles. I have certain way of thinking to achieve a certain goals, and I'm trying to share my way of thinking and thought process for that. And then the last is the surround audio editing workflow. And when I mean surround audio editing workflow, I don't necessarily mean panning. I mean the spatial immersion, the depth of field. In sound, people say sound is, you have X, Y, Z is the 3 dimensions, in panning. But then I'm not even talking about any direction per se. I'm talking about the depth of field, how far the sound is, how close the sound is. That kind of spatial imaging is what I'm thinking of. So moving on to the next one. So I'm going to rush through some of the slides, which are just very basic, and I'm sure everybody will know about it, and then we will focus on something later on. So normally in a sound editing workflow, you have these things. You have pre-production, production sound, post-production, and re-recording mix and delivery, right? So we're just going to briefly look into these steps. The first step, the pre-production. Normally this is where a director, a cinematographer, or an editor, they sit together, they try to figure out how the scene is supposed to look like, and all of these conversations, right? And sound is never in that conversation. They're never in that room. We never get access into that room to contribute creatively what we are thinking about. I'll give you an example. Let's imagine they are trying to figure out a car chase. Yeah. and the production designer is thinking about, okay, how do we frame this car? How do we make it look menacing? How do we make it look powerful for the hero, right? And they're thinking of wraps, modifications to make it look cool. But nobody in that group thought about, okay, what kind of car can we actually use from a sound perspective to make it feel the adrenaline rush when they rush through, I once had to design a car chase between two Tata Indica cars, you know. So that kind of thing happens, Put yourself in that kind of shoes. Like, it's very easy. It doesn't cost a lot to convince the production to, to have a different car. It's not going to add any budget on their plans, but the experience that you might end up giving with the right kind of car, with the right kind of sound, it makes a massive difference. But then we're not included in that conversation at all, mostly, but there should be. That's my point of view. And then the production sound, I'll keep it very basic there. This is just what the production recorder captures on set, which is the dialogue predominantly. And then this talk lives here, the post production editorial. This is what I'm going to talk about. This is my skill, and we are going to focus on that, not so much about re recording, mixing, and delivery. This is a very valid point. People keep saying that, great sound is invisible. It is invisible. If you do your job well, it is invisible. That's what they say, and it is very true, because what we are doing is very, very subconscious. I once read a research somewhere which said an average human brain has two parts of the brain. One is the conscious part of the brain, and the other one is the subconscious part of the brain. And the conscious part of the brain can focus up to 8 to 10 items per second for an average human being. So if I give you a phone number or something like that, that's 8 to 10 digits. A conscious part of the brain can process that in a second. But subconsciously, humans are processing 12 million items per second. That's what the research said. So you can see sound is very subconscious, which is why we don't feel when it is done well. The audience, they choose to believe it, right? Now, when do they feel that it's not right? Is that when you do something out of the ordinary. But that could be an intent as well in the story narrative process. Like here, for example, I'll take a wooden door as an example. If you have a wooden door, somebody opening a door in a scene, and instead of a wooden door, you put a space shuttle door, then it straight away takes the audience out of this moment, and it makes them feel there's something odd here, right? So that could be an intent as well, but that could also be a mistake. And a perfectly designed battle sequence is very easy for the audience to listen to. They enjoy it, but they don't know why this works. They don't know why. They don't understand why this works, but they just feel the entire experience. All right. So the best way to do our job is don't break that illusion. Now we are going to discuss as we progress how to bring that illusion even more, how to make that even more believable. How to cheat the audience into making them feel a certain way to the way that we want them to feel. So these are just the 4 pillars of sound. So dialogue, sound effects and sound design, and Foley and music, right? So dialogue is what gets recorded on set and recorded in studio as ADR, and sound effects and sound design is what we're going to focus on. Is where you could say these are the sounds that the characters in the story hears. Instead of saying, okay, we're doing this for the audience, this is what, if you put yourself in the middle of a scene on a trade show, and if you are the character, what do you hear? And as a sound editor, sound effects editor, sound designer, we are thinking about, okay, what can this character hear? So if we give this impression to the audience, then the audience, because they are hearing through the character, they will also start to see the story through the character's eyes. Thereby, you're making them a part of it, right? Okay. So the next is Foley, which is just performed actions of the actors, and then the music, which is for the emotional support. The first and most important meeting, this is called the spotting. This is an important session that we call. So whenever I start a film, I have a session with the director, editor, composer. This is where we sit and we figure out a lot of questions, a lot of things. The first thing is, what should this film sound like? You know. So for example, when we worked on Durandar, we discussed, okay, what is Liari? What kind of place it is? What kind of landscape is it? What kind of sounds can you hear that? It's got narrow alleyways, dusty roads, dirty places. There's a lot of dirt around, flies buzzing, open markets, crowded, chaotic. This is Liari. So what happens to when we go to Jamil Jamali's house, which is he lives in a completely posh neighborhood, which is a completely different to. It's a difference in society. He lives a better lifestyle, a completely different lifestyle to these thugs and goons and gangsters who live in this world. So we had these kind of questions. We had these kind of thoughts, and this is where we decide what to do and what not to do as well. So we decided, okay, this film is never going to be a realistic kind of film. We don't want it to be realistic because we want it to be very aggressive, in your face. And then we also had questions ourselves like, where is the emotional center of the film? Which will make the audience get attracted to the movie more? And in Durandar's case, it's not in the action scene that everybody thinks about. It's actually between the action scenes where you feel the emotional pain of the character. So how can we build that up? And also, what is silence meant in a movie? In every movie, there's got to be silence, and silence is not just muting a microphone and not doing anything. It's if you're thought. I mean, I would actually say silence is not silence, but calmness, quietness. You know, there's a difference between quietness and calmness, and silence is not vacuum. You know, like if you're in a quiet forest, the trees, the creaking of the trees, the movement of the leaves rustle, all of those things, they're still, you would still call it calm. You see what I mean? So what does silence mean in this? For example, in a movie like Durandar, it's those emotional moments that we try to stay away from. And how do we give that feel of staying away from the characters doing whatever they're doing is to make the previous scenes and the later scenes or other parts of the movie more busier. So this feels like it's a little empty. So that kind of thinking. And even in moments like gunfights, those kind of things, we try to find ways to have some level of quietness between two gunshots, between three gunshots, you know, those kind of moments. I actually made the guns smaller for the second part of the movie than the first one because there was so much going on. So I had to find ways to find those little moments, and it's those little moments that's going to help us to deliver powerful sound later on. So that's the thing. And the last thing is we got to find in any film what's the loudest in the movie. And once we figure out what is the loudest of the movie, we calibrate everything around it against that. So in that movie, it was an explosion. You know, explosions were the loudest things. So we calibrated everything against it. And why is this important is that, you know, on that movie in particular, as an example, it was 3.5 hours long on the first one, and the second one was nearly 4 hours long. So if we don't take these decisions, you can make the audience fatigue when they go out of the theater. They'll have a headache. So we can't make those decisions. So this is a very, very important stage in sound editorial. This is where you decide, you figure out what to do. That doesn't mean you're gonna do exactly what you set out to do here. This is like a roadmap. You make a roadmap of what you're going to, in which direction are you going to travel in this movie in 6 months or 5 months, however long you're going to work in that film, and what are you going to try. This is like a roadmap. We have a creative discussion and we make all of this. But if you're not prepared here, you're going to end up making a lot of mistakes downstream. And the mistakes that you would make downstream would be very expensive. You'd be sitting in an expensive mix room with directors, composers, and everybody else, and you would be repenting the mistakes that you've made because you have to go back and fix all of that, and that's costly. So this stage is very important. And then let's move on to the dialogue editing. So even though I'm not a dialogue editor, I'm not going to focus too much about that. What is still is relevant is that this dictates everything else. So everything that we, because this is what tells the story. Of course, when it is not non-talkie film like a silent film or something like that, which is very rare. But in general, this is what tells the story, right? So we need to make sure everything that we do is built around this. So the intention is not to disturb this or disturb it when that is the intent. So the dialogue editors basically they do all the cleaning up of the dialogue, fix inconsistencies, take out disturbances, and make it feel like one continuous scene instead of shots put together taken in different timelines. And also the ADR, when you record them in a studio and you put them back into the mix, it should feel like it was said on the location. So this is what the dialogue editors do. And this slide is my principles when it comes to sound effects, when I'm doing sound effects. Every sound that I pick, no matter what it is, no matter what film it is, I ask myself these 5 questions. And the answer for these 5 questions is the choice of the sound that I'm trying to put. So in a nutshell, if I give you an example, I ask 5 questions myself for every single sound requirement. Every single sound. It could be anything. It could be a cough like that. It could be anything. I would ask 5 kind of questions. I ask what, where, how, when, and why. What is the first question? So what am I trying to cut? Let's take an example of a door again. Everybody has heard doors, what a typical door sound like. So when I say I'm doing a door, I'm asking myself, what kind of door is it? Is it a wooden door, a metal door, or a glass door? What kind of door? Let's say if I decide a wooden door, then I start thinking, what kind of wooden door? Is it like a 5-star hotel elite posh door which opens, or is it like a college hostel door which is flimsy, or is it like a castle wooden door which is massive and big? So what kind of locks does it have? Does it have mechanical locks? Does it have clockwork kind of lock? Does it have science fiction electronic hydraulic kind of locks? So all of these questions, I ask all of these questions, and even though you don't see all of this detail in the shot, all of this can add character to, let's say, if it's a hero's house or if it's a king's palace, you just see 2 massive blocks of wood opening on set on the shot. But you can do all of this work, clockwork and stuff like that behind it, the pulleys pulling the castle door, rattling of chains and all that. So these define the character of the palace and and thereby the characters who live in that place, right? And then should it creak or should it not creak? That's the other question. If you decide it should creak, what kind of creak it should be? Should it be a long creak, one long creak throughout the action, or just make a creak at the start of it and not make a creak at the end of it and just make a little creak towards the end of it? So all these kind of questions, you ask yourself what you're trying to do, what I'm trying to do. I do that all the time. And then once I find this out, then the second question I ask is where? Where is this sound coming from what we see? When I mean where, what I'm talking about is how far is that from the viewer, from the viewer's point of view, in the frame? How far is it? Is it like very close? Is it far away? Is it a wide shot and we see someone far down the aisle? Or is it really close up? We don't even see it's a door, it's just a wooden block, and suddenly we have a character coming through that. So where is that happening? And this question, and also Where is this door in general? Is it in a big hall, or is it in a small room, or is it a toilet door? So all these kind of questions, because this dictates the space of where that sound comes from, which dictates the choice of reverb that you have to do for it. And then the third question is how. How is the character interacting with this door, for example? Is the character trying to sneak into somebody's house, or is the character aggressive, going to go to barge in through the door and going to fight? Um, that is the next question, because they have different sounds. The intent is different in that case. And the next question is when. And when I say when, it's basically a sync point. You find where the sound is and you put it there. But it doesn't have to be as simple as that. Like, for example, you might see a character, just the door opens and a character walks in. But you can make 30 seconds of someone trying to open the door before they come through, right? And that could mean completely different thing. And if that means the person is trying to steal something here, or he could just immediately have a latch open and come in. That means he could be the owner of the house. We don't know that until he comes in. So, for example, let's say you have a scene where two people are having a conversation and one of them picks up a phone and starts talking. And you put that phone ring just before the person answers. That's a completely different meaning. Instead of letting that phone ring for about, if the scene is 3 minutes long, let's say you start the phone ring in 1.5 minutes and you let it ring for 1.5 minutes and the character picks up. This is completely different meaning. So when the character picks up immediately, that means the conversation he was having with the other person in that space is not so important. Somebody who is calling here, that conversation is important. So picked up the phone immediately as soon as it rang. But if you do it the other way around, the person who is calling is irrelevant to the story. The conversation that they're having at that space is more important, right? So when has these two definitions. And then the last important question is why? Why do we need to do this? Why do we need to do this sound? Does it have to be in the story or not? Does it do anything to the story? Once you ask all of these questions, and if you have answers to all of these things, then I go into my sound library browser, manager, SoundMiner, whatever. That gives me a clarity of thought, what I'm trying to achieve, how I'm going to achieve, and how it should sound like. So this is my way of, my principles of how I pick my sounds when it comes to sound effects. Then the next one is the Foley, which is, this is where, it's performed actions. So basically an artist is walking into studio, walking or handling props or doing all these kind of things. Now, without this, you can't sell this lie that we're trying to build. What we're trying to build is a lie. And without this, you can't sell it, because this is adding so much of believable factor to what we're trying to sell. So this is very important. And if it is wrong, even one note, or if something is missing, the audience feel it straight away. So this is a very important glue to make our work feel thing. And music. Well, I would define music and sound design as, like I said earlier, sound design is what the character is hearing, and music is what the audience are hearing. So through the character, we show them what to hear. So the audience starts looking at the film as how the characters are seeing it. Subconsciously, with music, we are telling the audience, feel this at this point of the movie. Between lines, feel that. After line, feel that. Before the line, feel that. We are priming the audience to think a certain way. It's so subconscious. Okay, and in movies, you have these types of, the score, which is the background score, and then you have the source music. Sometimes you have a scene with some music being played in that scene, or it's a part of the scene. And then this also dictates a relation. This has a relationship with sound effects and sound design. It has a direct relationship with sound effects and sound design, because when it takes over, the music is trying to tell something to the audience, make them feel a certain way. And if music is doing that on its own, we can lay off. Or if it needs some kind of help, how to achieve that help. That is the other way of thinking about it. And that this forms a direct relationship. Now, this is sound effects and music. And then we will move on to the ambience part of it. When I'm doing ambiences, I think about it in three spaces. So the first space is the story space, wherever the story happens. For example, let's take a doctor's room, an office, where you go into a doctor's rooms for a health checkup, where the character goes into a doctor's office for a health checkup. So the first thing I look at in that space is what kind of things can make sounds in that space. That could be a computer with very old computer or a new computer, whatever, some kind of hard disk whines or hums. Does it have a light? Maybe a light hum. And then it can have an air conditioning unit or a fan or something like that. So those are sounds that are happening, that can happen within that space. So, and I can't avoid them because it's there and you see it and you want to make some sounds for it. And then it's also the question of whether you want to make sounds for it or not. That's a different question altogether. But then I pick these things first. And then the second space is the adjacent space. What's next to that doctor's room? If you have, let's say, a corridor outside the doctor's office, what's happening? What can happen in the corridor? So that could be the next patient coughing, could be a baby crying far down the corridor, could be a nurse walking by, somebody moving a gurney or a stretcher or something like that. A very distant phone ringing down the corridor in the reception's desk, and maybe a PA announcement on a hospital. These kind of things can happen in a place like that. And then the third space is the outside world. Where is this hospital? Is this hospital in the city, or is it in a village? Is it what kind of time? What time is it in in the story space? Is it busy morning, or is it a lull, quiet night? What kind of, so that dictates the choices of sound. So when I start a scene, I think of it like these three spaces, and I come up with ideas. What can happen in this first space? What can happen in the second space? What can happen in the third space? And I pick all these sounds. I find gaps between the dialogue, and I place these individual sounds here and there, like maybe a distant horn, and maybe one distant siren, and then maybe a phone ring, and then maybe. So I find moments for these kind of things between the dialogue, and I place them, and then I hit play, and then I decide. This I call this an assembly. So you assemble the sounds you want and put that in the scene. Then I play. Then I start questioning: do I need to have a sound in this pause? What is happening in that moment? Is the character reacting to something? Maybe is the character reacting a certain way to a certain dialogue? So at that moment, we want to be focusing on the actor's performance than if is this sound taking the attention away or helping the audience to pay more focus to that. Then I start questioning like that, and then I start taking out stuff that I put in already. So that's how I start building effects edits, ambience edits. Now, you can achieve. So when I said you're inside the doctor's office and you want to hear a phone ring, which is way down the hallway, or maybe a vehicle passing by outside of this hospital, you can achieve these kind of things by techniques like EQing, reverbs, and all of this kind of tools. And this brings to my next slide, which is this is one of the reasons why I started shifting from using Pro Tools to a very lesser known DAW called Reaper I made this decision. So why Reaper? Why did I have to switch? So I was a pro producer like everybody else until 2016, 2015. And then, so because this was my workflow and this was my thinking. So to fit a sound into these kind of spaces, I had to do a lot of processing. I mean, I can't hope to sit in a room and record a siren which is like 50 feet away. I want to be able to find a way where I have a siren from a sound library, but I fit it as if it is coming from 80 feet away, behind the walls. So for those kind of things, I had to do a lot of processing. And not just that, let's say I was trying to build, imagine this building is collapsing, and I'm trying to do sound for this building collapsing. Now, what can this building have? There's a lot of metal beams, there's some concrete, stones. So when this crashes, you're gonna have metal. Maybe there's a fire accident, let's say. So you want to have some fire, you want to have some metal, want to have some concrete, stones, large stones, small stones, debris, all of these things, and wooden chairs. So for a task like this, pre 2016 or 15, my workflow used to be like this. For every reel or every film, every reel of a film or every episode of a show, I would have 2 sessions for every reel. My main session is what I call the edit session. This is what gets delivered to the mix stage. So on that, I have a consistent thought process of how I group my sounds, what kind of sounds I will have in each groups, and I will have the same number of tracks throughout the film. Let's say I have 8 tracks of wind, and that group will only have wind. When I mean group, I mean like it could be routed to a folder track or an aux, but everything throughout the film in those 8 tracks, it'll only have wind. It'll not have anything else. So I like this kind of organization. So when I'm processing these kind of sounds, I just don't want to end up creating new tracks, and I don't, because I'm doing this to make the mix engineer's job easier, so that when they're working with a director, there's mixing, there's music composer, there's 10 people sitting on the mix stage. You don't want the mix engineer to scroll all the way down to find out this particular sound and that particular sound. If the director says, hey, reduce the thunder, I want the mixer to go one fader down. That's it. That's how I want my sessions to be organized. And this organization varies from every film. For every film is a different way of organization, because whatever that film demands, right? So I call this my edit session, which is what gets delivered to the mix stage. But then this kind of track layout shouldn't limit my creativity to think what I want to do, right? So for that, I had another session, which I call the design session. And I can put whatever I want in there. Everything goes there. So like, for example, let's take this example of this building crashing. I would close down my edit session and I would open my design session. And my design sessions used to be normally 96 kilohertz or 192 kilohertz, okay? Because that allows me to do a lot of processing. I'll tell you more when we do it. So for a building crash like this, I would have a bunch of tracks, like 10 tracks, where I will cut stones, massive stones. And then if I don't have massive stones, I will pick some smaller stones and pitch them up, pitch them down. And when I choose these smaller sounds, I choose sounds that were recorded with high resolution microphones like Sennheiser 8040, which can capture up to 50 kilohertz, or the Sanken CO 100K, which can capture sounds up to 100 kilohertz. And if it was recorded at that higher frequency, if you open in an isotope, you can see frequencies beyond 40, 50, and those kind of things. And those kind of samples, when you pitch them down, you're not going to lose the high frequency information, which is why I created my Pro Tools session in 192 or 96, depending on what I'm trying to make. And in that session, every track will be vary speed, so I can just pitch them up and down whenever, however I want. And processing, like for example, I will have this bunch of tracks to concrete, and I'll have a bunch of tracks routed to another folder, which will be metal, and I'll have another bunch of tracks routed to metal groans and moans and just that kind of thing. And I'll have another bunch of tracks routed to another folder, debris, sand debris, wooden debris, so many groups like that. And I can use whatever plugins I want, transient designers, subharmonic enhancers, low-end enhancers, distortion plugins, any kind of thing that I can think of. And then once I designed this with picture, only for that moment. And once that happens, I print bounces of those auxes, those groups that I made. And then I take them into my edit session, I put them in, and then I pan them to the picture. And that's how I used to work back in those days. And the problem with that workflow was that I was getting to a stage where now I've designed this building crashing. But let's say there's all these people. Let's say all these people are screaming and running away when this building is crashing. That I'm doing in my edit session. Now, when I took all these tracks, I put them in my edit session, and I'm hearing it with the context, with everything in context. Then I feel like, that metal groan isn't working quite well. I have to change it. I want to modify it. I want to pitch shift it even further, or I want to make the impact even louder. Then I close this session. I go back to that session. I open that session, fiddle around with it, tweak it, rebounce it, export it, bring it back again. And especially if there's a new re-edit coming in, then it makes the whole process even more complex. This is where I was around 2015, 2016. And at that time, I was thinking about, why don't I pick, because at the end of the day, we're just making a bunch of audio. Also, the other factor is, I might be using Doppler plugins or doing any kind of things for making something move and stuff like that. And I shouldn't be expecting a mix studio to be having those plugins. What's the point of a Doppler plugin in a mix studio? So I shouldn't be expecting them to have that plugin. So at the end of the day, we're just making audio files, right? And we are just putting it in timeline as a sequence. Then I started thinking, okay, so why don't we use Pro Tools as a sequencer, where you just put the sounds, place them in the timeline, sync them up, and leave Pro Tools open. And I can do all of this in some other platform. Okay? So that was my intention of why I bumped into this. And when I started thinking like that, you could ask, why Reaper? Why not, Nuendo or Cubase or whatever, or Logic or whatever? So I did try a lot of things, and it was too expensive for me at the time. I didn't have the money to buy it, let's be honest. So I bumped into this Reaper, and the first thing I thought about it was very refreshing, is the pricing model. When I went to the downloads page, and when I tried to buy it, it was $60, the price of the DAW, the personal license. And there's a commercial license, I think, at $200 or something like that. So when I bought it, dollar was 4,000 rupees for $60. Now it's a lot more, but then that was the cost of it at the time. And I thought maybe the personal license is different from the commercial license. Maybe it has different features. Maybe I thought the personal license was like a stripped down version of it. But no, it wasn't. It's the same version. They trust you as a user to pay whichever license suits you. I was like, okay, this is new. And then I tried to download the installer, and it downloaded in like a second or two. It was 30 MB. I thought this is some kind of a download manager where you download this, and then this downloads another bunch of files like so many other DAWs. And then no, this was the entire DAW. And I was like, what? I opened my phone and I checked. WhatsApp was 310 MB, to put it in context. WhatsApp on your phone is 310 MB, and this DAW is just 30 MB. It's that kind of lean code. And I couldn't understand what was going on here. But then I started using it. The more I started using it, the more I started figuring out this has so many things that I can completely keep my Pro Tools open. This is let me say one thing here clearly. This is not a Pro Tools versus Reaper or Nuendo. This is not that kind of talk. What I'm trying to do is how can you use all kinds of tools to enhance what you're trying to achieve. Pro Tools is still the industry leader and it will be the industry leader. You can't change it. Nobody can change it because everybody else, all of us are used to that workflow. And from Hollywood to Bollywood to Kollywood, every industry is using that. So that is going to be the delivery format. I still deliver in Pro Tools. I own Pro Tools. So this is not a Pro Tools versus any other DAW debate. It's not even a debate. I'm just sharing my workflow. So let's be clear about that. So what I was trying to do is have Pro Tools open, and I can have a DAW which I can open, and I can make all of this. So in a sense, I was using Reaper like a processing chain, where I can put some plugins on, do whatever I want, and bounce it out, and import that into Pro Tools. That's it. So I don't have to close the session, open the session, going back and forth. So this is how I started it, right? So when I was using this, I found something very interesting. I'll actually show you something. So I've got a bunch of examples for you to show. So I've got a bunch of tracks. This is a 96 kilohertz mono file. All right. In the same track, I have a 96 kilohertz stereo track. And in the same track, I have a 46 kilohertz stereo track. And in the same track, I have a quad 96 kilohertz sample. That's, I don't know how many channels, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 channel. It's again 48 channel, 48 sample rate. So as you can see, I can have my photo there if I want to. So in this DAW, a track is a container. You can put anything in it. I can have MIDI items. I can have MIDI in the same track. I can have mono, stereo, it doesn't matter. And sample rate is very important to me because if you see this session, well, I'm running on 48,000 kilohertz right now. But the interesting thing about this the interesting thing about this is if I go here, you see that little eye that says on the clip, there's a little eye. If I hover over it, you can see this sample is originally 96 kilohertz, but when I play it, Reaper automatically resamples it in real time. So the source file is untouched. The source file is still at 96, but if I hit play, we are hearing that at 48. Okay, so I can do all sorts of manipulations with this. And then this is where I started. This is strange. So I can do a lot of things with it. So then I decided to play around with this. So I will show you an example. This is one sample. So that's the sound. And I've taken that one single sample and I have manipulated to get to something like and this entire construction was done with just that one sample. Okay, I'm going to show you what I've done here. So if I make a copy of it, this is called, okay, first thing, if you want to pitch shift this, is as simple as just doing a drag. That is pitch shifting. So every track is elastic audio in nature. But if I don't want to just pitch shift it like this. Let's say I want to pitch shift it like dynamically. So I can drag like that. And that. is a time and pitch shifting. So I can vary pitch and stuff like that. And if you want to put an EQ, you can put it on the clip, just like your clip effects in Pro Tools. And there's no limit to this. I can continue to put as many as I want on the clip, and I've never run into a limit in this. I can have as many plugins as I want, and I can have all of this as a chain, and I can recall it at will with just names. Like, for example, now I did this, so I'm going to call it, I have made presets like that. Now that has a Saturn, has a Pro R2, and this is running in real time. It's not getting processed, it's not getting applied. And if you want to do some tweaks to this, I can automate this. Now, you see that envelope. I don't want the reverb at the beginning, and I want the reverb at the end. So there. So now I'm automating it on the fly without even thinking about it. And this automation stays with a clip, so I can move it anywhere I want. I can split it. I can continue to stretch it like that, and the automation gets stretched even further. I can do all the, and I can just make another copy here. And when I'm doing all of this, it's not creating any new media. You understand? So for me to try something, I grab some files from the library and I put them together and try something. I'm not making any new media whatsoever. And even if I am making new media, I would make that as FLAC or WAV file, because Reaper supports all kinds of file formats. So you have WAV, AFF, the usual, and you have FLAC. WavePack is a lossless, it's like FLAC, but WavePack can have more than 8 channels, like 10 channel file, 12 channel file, and everything else. And the other part about this is that each bus in Reaper can be 128 channels wide. So you can, in a way, you can have one audio track with 128 channels. So that's how wide it is. So then I started doing these kind of things. So like I said, this is one sound, and I made this with it. So basically, this is a stretched version of it, and this is a reversed version of it. So I just grabbed that same file and I reversed it. It's just a reversed file. And I had some Saturn and this, and then here is again that part pitch shifted. It became like that, and that's got a shit ton of here I'm doing parallel processing. So in one clip. So the first one is a dummy EQ, okay? And this one, it says parallel low and saturate. That's basically a folder for your effects. So you can have plugins, you can have a bunch of plugins and put those bunch of plugins into a folder and control the entire, okay, are you following me? Okay, so if I have this, if I have a EQ, a reverb, now these are 2 different plugins, right? Now I can choose to put them in a container and name that whatever I want. Not that one, that one. I can name that whatever I want, and these plugins are inside that container, and the entire container has a wet dry controller. So you can have multiple. So this is what I'm doing here. What I'm doing here, if I bypass this, that's the source, that's the processing. What I have is I'm running the second one as parallel to the previous effects. Okay, and so if I bypass this, you're going to hear only the parallel part of it. That's the parallel. So I'm basically compressing it and then saturating the low end out of it, and then I'm mixing that back into the original, and I'm limiting that and maybe doing some reverb on top of that. So that's how that became that. Similarly, you can do extreme processing like this without breaking a sweat. And I can, if I like this, I can save the entire thing as a chain and recall it with a search, and it will have the same. And if I want to do it, automate it, I can automate from that point. That was very attractive. And then, oh, I think I accidentally showed you something I was about to show. This can have multiple projects like tabs on Google Chrome. So I can have 8 tracks here and another 5 tracks here. So I can copy stuff from this with the same plugin processing. Because it's all on the clips, I can go to any of my project and paste it anywhere I want, like that. And there's another feature which is very interesting for me, for my workflow, is called subprojects. So let's say if I save this in my download, Palm test, no, Palm. Okay, if I save that here, I have a feature where I can render this as subproject. So let's just put this all the way at the top. So what happens is, in fact, okay, it's asking me for a name. I'm going to give a name. Whatever. Okay, now you see what's happened here is I can delete these. This is what I made them with. And this is a mix of that. It will look like a simple audio file, but if you pay close attention, it says RPP. So that's a project in itself. So I can Command Shift double click that, and opens the source that I created with. And if I want to make modifications on this, I can mute this. I can mute that. I can even mute that, just for the sake of it. Now, if you go back to the project, that's empty. And if you want to bring that back again, you go here and you bring that back. Not that. I think I closed it by mistake. Yeah, whatever. I closed it by mistake, but that's, you get the idea. So you can have an entire project constructed like this. So I can do, I started doing stuff like this to get that impression of something far away and something nearby and these kind of things. Another example is that there is that is a wind sample, standard wind, no fancy, nothing going on. And I made something like this out of it. That's basically a chopper effect with no plugins on. I pitch shifted them like 25 semitones like that. And this is an LFO. It's called an automation item, where you can move the item. You can move the automation as a clip. So I made that, and I've just made LFO. And with the same sample, I've made something like, so here I'm doing the same LFO kind of thing, but I'm varying the speed of it, and I've got a tail reverb to finish off at the end of it. Um, and then stuff like, um, that is a Nordic horn, not this, that is a Nordic horn. It's a Nordic war horn. And I made that from that. So as you can see, the power of this is incredible. You can do all kinds of things that you didn't even imagine that was possible. And this made me think in a completely different way. And then I got stuck. How do I deliver this? Now I've started making these sounds. How do I deliver this? Now let's go back to my slide. So after I started doing all of these things, I was trying to somehow take all of this material back to Pro Tools, because that's where I lose my job if I don't deliver in Pro Tools, right? So I have to deliver, find a way to deliver. And then I figured out with AI and a lot of plugins, I mean, back in the day, there wasn't AI. There are certain people that you can go to who can write Python and Lua code, because Reaper has open scripting support. So you can literally make whatever you want. That you can make sounds in Reaper and you can bring it into Pro Tools in 3 different methods. Method 1 is a standard bounce that you have in every other DAW, but it will render it with the timecode in the file. So you just go into Pro Tools, drag and drop, spot mode, it goes to the exact location, right? The next one is an extension called Feral Freak extension. It's developed by the sound designer of Star Trek and shows like that. His name is Tim Farrell. So with this extension, you can literally spot a file just like how you spot from SoundMiner to Pro Tools. You can make a sound, bounce it in Pro Tools in Reaper, and then you can select it and spot to the same time code, to the same position in Pro Tools. So you can make a bunch of constructions, spot to Pro Tools. That's also possible now. And the third thing is what I'm using these days. It's called the PT Reaper Converter app by a company called filmsound.ai. The developer of that is a mix engineer. So I'm going to show you one example of one of my sessions. So this is one of my Reaper projects that I've recently done. So here are my groups. So I've got air, room tones. In one group, I have wind, trees, and leaves. In the other group, I have crowd, these kind of things in these groups. And if you see, I've done surround pans here. Reaper has built-in immersive panner. So I've got automation, X, Y, Z, all kinds of automation here. And there's this app called PT Reaper. When you finish this, you can bake in all your effects processes that you've done, and you can drag and drop that Reaper project file into this, and this will give you a Pro Tools session. So I converted that same project, the one that I have you shown, as a PTX through that app, and that converts everything from clip names, clip color, folder structures, your routing, your handles, your fades, your clip gain envelopes, if you have clip gain envelopes, the entire thing. So you can pretty much do it here and open it there, and your entire edit stays just the way you did it. So here's that session completely converted, and it's a 7.1.2 session for now. No AD engine. And once I converted, I just added like EQs on every track so that when I'm mixing something, I can change or automate in Pro Tools when I want it. But it's essentially the same plugin. It's the same session. Even my track comments, like in Reaper, I like to have comments. Like in this track, I have wind, trees, leaves, and grass. So in Pro Tools, that gets translated to track comments. And I've got pans exactly like that. It's sample accurate. Um, the same pan that you saw in Reaper, it's sample accurately converting to Pro Tools, and with the same, this file has the same QP that file, BGST7, same clip volume -6 -6. It's very accurate, and this is how I'm doing it these days. But sometimes I just design here, I spot it into Pro Tools. So this is my workflow. So the key takeaways from today's session, I would say, um, is, this is the thing that works for me. Doesn't mean it should work for everybody else. Key takeaway is that, sound editors are sonic artists. Every sound starts with those 5 questions. Every scene exists in 3 spaces. Depth is not pan, is using all of these tools to make it feel far away or close up, and we can use any methods we want. The best sound edit is something that the audience never notices. Thank you. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to take it.
Hi Vijay.
Hi.
Thanks for this wonderful session. My query is when you convert the session from Reaper to Pro Tools or vice versa, does it give you the original source clip as well, the source file as well, or just edit it?
You can do it in multiple ways. You can actually reference the same file, meaning Pro Tools and Reaper the Pro Tools session PTX file and the Reaper project RPP file can exist in the same folder, and they can link to the same audio files.
Okay.
That's also possible.
Okay. You can also have only edited clips with handle lengths. Or
Yeah,
something.
you can do that. However, there
So
are
all
multiple.
options are
Yeah, all options are available.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But currently, this can only do up to 7.1.2 pan. So if you're looking to do 7.1.4 or 9.1.6 or something like that, this can't do it, but it's definitely on their pipeline. They'll definitely make it sometime.
So what is the max now?
7.1.2.
Hello, sir.
Yes, hi.
Myself, Rihan.
Hi.
I have actually a question. So, if I have a mix file, PTX file from Pro Tools.
Yeah,
and-
that's another thing I was going to say, but it was too fast. I didn't have time to say that. Yes, you can literally import session data, a PTX. You can convert a Pro Tools project back to Reaper as well. So but then, it will only do the pans. So if you have plugins on the inserts and stuff like that in Pro Tools, then those won't convert. So if you want to convert something from Pro Tools to Reaper, make sure you commit those EQs and reverbs and whatnot. So commit them, and then it will convert the edits, the clip gain, clip volumes, automation, volume, pans, all of that will work, except the plugins.
Okay. Also, if we are opening multiple projects in Reaper, how does the processing work? Like,
As
would
powerful as your computer.
it won't crash?
No, it doesn't die on. I mean, I've not had crashes from Reaper in general, like unless it's because of a plugin that I'm using.
Okay. Also, one question as me as an assistant sound editor, if I have to design an ambience of something which is in the outer space, so we haven't heard anything outer space. So how do you actually design the ambience? What's going on in your mind? So if I give you a scenario that there is something, particularly a blast happening in this outer space, so there is no medium for the sound to travel. So like as in water. So if there's something happening in water, we could just muffle the sound and we could just treat it as good as possible. But how do you do it in space? Like that's my question.
Well, in space, in actuality, there is no sound in space, as you know. You have to do like what 2001 Space Odyssey did. But then, is that the intent of the filmmaker? You see, when you can't make a film like Gravity, following the same ideology that you had for 2001 Space Odyssey. They're completely different films. So you would have to take the creative liberty and, play around with it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, yeah, before you convert, you make sure you render them all as WAV files. So then it's easier for to convert. Yeah. So you render them all in the fixed frame, fixed 48 kilohertz. You do a render before you convert. Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.